Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot and very happy to be here today. So I have Lieutenant Eric Shine. I'm not sure whether you still use that title or not, Eric, but welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And we have a short bio that I got from the Corbett report that was posted here so people could get some background there. But why don't you introduce yourself and who you are and your status as a whistleblower at this time, and then what I'd like is a short overview of your actual case that everything started out with. I know it's going back many years now, but if you could do that, then people will know where they stand.
My name is Eric Shine, and I'm an officer in the Merchant Marine and in the United States Navy. I get my credentials from Kings Point or the United States Merchant Marine Academy. I could go into, I worked at Pearl Harbor, I worked at San Diego Sub Base. I worked at Ingalls Shipyard out in Pascagoula, Mississippi for GE, landing their equipment on board, LHTs and DDGs, missile frigates. I've worked in the maritime industry for a good part of 30 years. What else did you want?
Well, you're a whistleblower, and you had certain incidents that happened on, I think it's 3 ships. And so maybe you can describe the incidents, what from your point of view was going on, and then we'll get into the case after that.
Well, you read a little bit that was published on the Ninth Circuit, but it didn't start out with, but the most recent turn of events was on the Comet in 2000. I was working on it as the second assistant engineer, and what they were doing was we're lighting off the boilers, the high pressure main propulsion boilers, and what started to evolve was they were in a hurry to get the boilers done and this job done, and they weren't doing it very in a safe manner. It got so bad that I refused to carry out the orders to light off the boilers, and I stood back and I observed and I helped out, but I wouldn't light off the boilers the way they were doing it. And the third assistant engineer, he was ordered to go ahead and light off the boilers, and sure enough, there was an explosion, a flashback, and he got burned. And we had a safety stand down. He was rushed off to the hospital, and he was fortunately wearing all his protective gear. He had a burn down the side of his neck. He returned the next day, but that one incident set me off on a nightmare journey of it's lasted 25 years. The Coast Guard had eventually filed in 2003 charges against me for being depressed. They
But that's
moved.
kind of a leap. So can we back up to this incident? Didn't you say the first incident happened was it 2000?
No, well, the first incident was in 1996. It was actually the Sioux Likes, where the third assistant engineer was coming down to relieve me for the watch, and he was drunk. I wouldn't turn over the watch to him, so I went over the phone, called the chief, and he told me to take care of it myself. And I walked back over to the third assistant engineer to determine if he could, stand watch. And it was clear that he couldn't. So I went back to the phone. I called the chief engineer again. I motioned for the third to come over to the phone, and he took the phone and hit me upside the head with the phone. Which is no violence on board. It's one of the first things you learn. But I came to around the corner. He was taking his sweet time on working me over, and I came to, and I got control of him and asked me if he was going to stop if I let go of him. And he said yes. And so I let go of him. And then I went up to the chief and told him what happened. And they fired both of us for fighting. So rather than investigate and believe me, as my word, the third assistant engineer also went to Kings Point. That's where I went to. It's a federal military service academy. I come out as an officer in the Merchant Marine and also a naval officer.
Okay.
And
So
he did too.
Okay. Okay. The one that hit you?
Yeah.
Okay. Meanwhile, how was that resolved in terms of the person who was supposed to do the watch? Did the drunk guy do it? Did you do it? Did the other guy do it?
I don't know. I don't, I was.
You were just fired or whatever kind of thing?
Well, I went up to the chief, filled out a statement and told him what happened in writing. And they said that we could either shake hands and go along to get along, or if I pressed the issues, I would be fired.
And so what did you do in that case?
I stood my ground on what the second assistant engineer did, and they fired us both.
Oh, all right. So, but that was, you said, in the 90s, right?
Yeah, that was
And then
96.
subsequent to that, you were back on a ship, so you weren't fired from everything. You were just fired from that ship, or how did that
No,
work?
I had worked for GE, and I had worked as a port engineer for MSC and for the Navy, and I keep myself busy. But the next incident that had occurred was in 2000. It was a light off of the. It was a unrep ship, underway replenishment ship. It's called the SS Comet. It's what you call a stick ship or a ro-ro, and it's for the Navy, for Transcom and MSC, Military Sea Lift Command. It basically, it's a support ship for the Navy.
Okay, so that was the job you were on when this second incident happened. Is that right?
Yeah, that was the SS Comet, and that happened in the year 2000. And what had happened was I got into it somewhat.
Right.
The the third assistant engineer, he, was brought to the hospital. We had a safety stand down, and then what they did was they let me go as a second assistant engineer in charge of the boilers and promoted the third to my position. The guy that got burned, they promoted to my position.
Okay, so whose fault was that incident, though?
The chief engineers, really.
Okay, so he did something that endangered himself, or a different person did something to endanger?
No, the third lit off the boiler, even though I protested so much that I stood back and I wouldn't carry out the orders. And we have that right in our shipping articles that were enacted in 1791. But the chief engineer should have taken control and said, okay, why are you saying that? I don't understand what's wrong. When I protested so much that I stood back and I wouldn't do it. The third assistant stepped in.
Okay, but were you right?
Yeah.
Is there something wrong with the boiler, or was it
the way they were doing? They were pinning back the fuel oil solenoid to the locked out position. It shouldn't be in the locked out position until you get them up and running, and they're tested and proven. But even beyond that is you should use diesel oil to start the boiler, because it's much easier than heavy fuel oil. The heavy fuel oil is like tar.
Okay, but the guy who you were objecting to the way he was performing his duties, was he above you in rank, or were you above him?
No, I was protesting the way they were trying to have me light off the boilers, and it was not proper. I stepped back and refused to carry out the order, and the third was ordered to do it in my stead, to light off the boilers. And sure enough, as I had felt was going to happen, there was a boiler flashback, an explosion, and he got burned.
Okay, and did you
that
any
that would have been that
so you
would have
got
been
fired even though you warned them and you were right?
Say that again.
So you got, at that point you said you got, someone took your, at the end of that incident, you were replaced because you wouldn't carry out the order, but the other guy who carried out the order got injured, and that same guy, even though he went to the hospital, got promoted into your command or whatever that.
Exactly.
And you were in the right, however. Did anyone give you any commendation for having been right or sort that out at all?
No. What had happened is that the afloat personnel manager, this guy Archie Morgan, who went to my academy, he is he's a Morgan. He's related to J.P. Morgan.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, but what was the outcome?
Well, he set up a series of retaliations, job actions against me, that didn't stop for the next 15 years, 20 years.
Okay, but again, maybe we don't understand, just for the clarity for my audience. This person, what was his role again in that? There was like 3 men involved in that incident. Was he
on board?
On the watch? I mean, not the watch, but the boiler, or was he, the one that stepped in even though you told him not to? What was Morgan? Was Morgan the guy that got injured?
No, Morgan was the afloat personnel manager back in the offices of ASM, APL, Patriot Management Services, all these array of companies that were, they were doing everything wrong. It was like He was the afloat personnel manager for
Okay.
government ships and private ships. And you're not supposed to use the same person to run government ships as you do uh, private ships.
Okay, so is this the second incident then?
Yeah.
Okay, now
Well,
isn't there a third?
there was a
Sorry.
bunch more
Oh,
smaller incidents, like throughout my career where I had tried to access the licensed personnel board, but I found out that it wasn't in the contracts anymore. They had it was in the contracts. They were being paid for it, but they weren't doing it. They weren't providing it to the engineers for access to it. And this is the way it's written. Any and all grievances are supposed to be handled in the licensed personnel board.
okay. So this is my question. Overall, if you look at your personality, did you get along with your sort of fellow officers or teammates on ships in general, or were you sort of the odd man out in general? Because you sound like you're a person who is very detail oriented. You probably seem to be quite right. I wouldn't doubt that you're quite right by the way you're describing your role. But other people were being very shoddy or not doing their jobs properly, and you wouldn't go along and get along in those cases. Is that correct?
Well, I was sailing out of the halls, which is much different than other personnel who take a job and they're on that ship for 10, 15, 20 years. I was coming on as a relief out of the hall, providing whatever support. And because of that, I was on a number of ships and I would see different ways that would be done. And there's better ways to do things. And you kind of, learn quicker.
So, in when you voiced in these various things, they weren't listening to you. It sounds like, right? Is that correct?
No. And that one of the key factors was that they had shut down the licensed personnel board, which was the avenue to have any and all grievances heard.
Okay. So,
But
what do you
but well,
remember?
no,
What
but
year they shut that down?
it was in 91 about or so,
So they actually
or
got
or, or,
all
or
those.
earlier.
All right. So it was shut down. So you didn't have any recourse. Is that correct?
Yes, and the Coast Guard it plays into much of this is that the Coast Guard has changed over the years. The shipping commissioners that used to be federal district court Article 3 judges. And they're now what has happened is the Coast Guard has taken them over as Article 2 executive branch officers. That it means they're not supposed to do it. But and
Who isn't supposed to do what?
the shipping commissioners that I had, two McKenna was one, and the other was Lieutenant Commander Walter J. Brodzinski. He was involved in the 9/11 administrative hearings that they had for the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund.
Okay. Maybe we'll deal with that a little later, but just to get this scenario of how you got into this predicament is that there were sort of a series of incidents that you said went on where you were maybe not a long termer on those ships, but you came in and you saw certain things not being done right. So you refused orders in those situations.
Yeah, and we have it in our contracts that we can refuse if it affects life, or somebody's going to be hurt or something
Right.
like, yeah.
Well, how can there be no, I mean, usually even if there's an injury, there has to be some board or something that handles injuries and handles delving into who's at fault and all of that kind of thing. Are you trying to say that there was no board, that you had no one you could appeal to?
Yes.
Okay, did you have a commanding officer?
But, well, we don't have a commanding officer because, we work in the industry as a civilian, and then we're activated by Title 10 executive orders that would, whatever rank I am in the Navy, then they would activate it and I would assume my duties. It would be like if we declared war tomorrow and I was on a ship, all of a sudden if I'm the highest ranking officer there, I would become an officer or liaison with the Department of the Navy.
Okay, so, but was this true in every incident that you had no board, you had no commanding officer, and you also went from you walked onto the ship, or you didn't walk onto the ship as a civilian, but you were switched over to being Navy the minute you set foot on the ship, or how, I mean, because it has to be a certain point that you become, because we're going to talk about the status of Coast Guard and how it's gone from being a military organization and how they tried to keep it civilian and all this different stuff. But you see what I'm saying? I'm trying to determine
When
when
I'm
you were acting in your capacities
as
in
as an
job.
officer in the Merchant Marine, which many of these officers in the Merchant Marine come up the hawse pipe. They're civilian mariners, but I graduated from Kings Point, and I'm a naval officer, and I'm trained in warfare and hand to hand and more. Um, we don't get activated and we don't become an officer in the Navy until Title 10 executive orders are issued by the Navy. And then that ship or me as a person would then be activated under Title 10 executive orders.
Okay, but the Title 10, was that in place on all these jobs or not?
No, I was a civilian mariner on one hand, and my naval commission had not been activated. On like the comment was in 2000. It was before 9/11.
Okay, so when, if ever, were you activated?
Never, because the what happened in October of 2003 after the Maui and the Mormac Sun and Jackson incidents, I was charged with being depressed because I had filed grievances for all of these various. The Coast Guard had gone as far as to kill a chief engineer. I'm trying to think of his name. I'll think of it here in a minute. On board his own ship, they were there, and he was testing the fire suppression system, and he was suffocated.
What do you mean kill him? I mean, what do you mean by that? They
Well, the Coast Guard doesn't have,
or what are you saying?
no, the Coast Guard doesn't have to investigate any deaths on board unless there's more than three. So if one guy dies, they don't have to investigate. If two guys die, they don't have to investigate. If three
How is
guys
that
die,
even possible?
you tell me. You tell me. You
Okay.
tell me.
That's very strange. Okay, but in
Yes.
your situation, no one died, right?
No.
Okay, and you had three major incidents, right? Those are the ones that are in the court case, or were there other cases in the court case?
I had filed against ASM, APL, whatever, but I'll follow your lead and defer to you.
Okay, well, can you
That
just answer the one question saying those
yeah,
three incidents that we're aware of on those three ships, the Maui, the Jackson, and what was the other one?
Maui, Jackson, Mormac Sun, the Comet,
The
and
Comet. Okay, so that you mentioned at least so far. So just saying, you filed grievances,
Grievance.
would you
Yeah,
say? Okay.
yes.
And did you describe those incidents and what did the board or whoever it is you filed them under? Was it your superior officer? Who is it that you said sent it?
It's the labor union, MEBA, that is contracted with these shipping companies and whatever. It started out in 1874, and in 1922, it joined the International Labor Organization out of Switzerland. Okay,
Right.
that gives you a little bit of coloring on the union, and it's not really a union; it's an association, and it's only supposed to be a pass-through agreement for the union because the union or the association um, gets its monies through the members. We pay the union to represent us. It doesn't really represent us,
Okay.
but
So you filed your grievances.
well, that the federal government issues all these contracts that are called shipping articles that were enacted in 1791.
Okay, but just to get a clear line for people to understand how the case came about that you ended up in a courtroom. So
A
what
military tribunal.
a military, okay. Who is it this Morgan person who initiated the military tribunal or someone associated with him, this other guy booed, whatever you say his name is, Zinsky?
Brzezinski, he's the ALJ, but there was a Lieutenant Commander Triboulet who was working with um, Morgan. Morgan wrote a letter asking the Coast Guard to investigate me through the hearing process. It's like, uh, you don't have a violation. He didn't do anything wrong. Um, uh, on March 1st, 2003, the Coast Guard moved into the Department of Homeland Security.
Mhm.
And 5 days later, they brought the charges against me that they didn't carry me into a military tribunal until 2008. So,
Okay,
so
but
I was charged under Bush, 2003, and then prosecuted under Obama.
okay. But in terms of, if we sort of take a lot of this away and just look at the humans involved, there seems to be sort of a small network in which you
Uh,
became
I would say
persona non grata.
a big network.
Okay, a big network. And these people, like Morgan and Brzezinski, as you say,
And McKenna.
possibly others, were part of it because you had shown up in these various incidents as not being a person that goes along and gets along. I mean, this kind of thing does, people get targeted for that, right? If you're a person who sticks to the letter of the law, if you know when things are not safe and you make a problem for others, right?
Right.
In a sense, you were already a whistleblower, right?
I was just trying to do my job, and
Sure.
and even like on the comment, I was trying to protect the chief engineer and
Obviously.
all these people that are there I'm working with,
Right.
and I'm saying no, I'm not going to do it. It's bad for you if you do it in this fashion
But
because it,
why? Okay. And I totally get that. And I think you've made that clear. I think your role there was actually admirable. Okay. So the question is, why didn't you have a superior officer who this incident was reported to, who could either reprimand you on the one hand or give you some compensation on the other? Was
Because
there a person that did that?
Archie Morgan was the afloat
Oh,
personnel manager, and he has so much money to influence. Like they charged me in 2003, and that's the same year that they got rid of the Comet. They sold it and scrapped it, and it was gone. So he buried the evidence of a ship that should have been investigated and carried forward years ago.
okay. Okay, so I mean, just in general, is this how the Coast Guard operates on a normal basis? Is this normal?
Yes. And it's gotten far worse since they are a branch of military now, because they're like the Surgeon General who is in charge of the U.S. health services. She thinks that you remember Jocelyn Elders? She was the Surgeon General.
Okay.
When you're a general, it doesn't mean you're the general, that you wear a uniform. It means that as a civilian, you are in charge. That's how we set up our government. That's how we're supposed to run everything. And the commandant of the Coast Guard, they said this in 1947. They brought it out in a Senate Judiciary Committee, where they said that basically and fundamentally, the Coast Guard is in the civilian branch of the government. It's not a branch of military. And then you look at what happened in 2003. Bush, Samuel Bush, Prescott Bush. You look at the organization that he's a member of, Skull and Bones, or the Brotherhood of Death, and you can see very clearly what he is involved in. It's war profiteering. Anybody who looks back at Bush, or Bush 1 or Bush 2, sees it clearly now.
Sure, no doubt. But to stay on your case for the moment, so you were sort of maybe you could say a dangerous position from the day that the person in the second incident was injured, even though you warned them, right?
Yeah.
And Morgan's response to that situation, where he was somewhat in authority,
Well,
a person to report to.
He was the
About the
afloat
incident.
personnel manager
Okay.
for APL, we'll call him.
Turned against you at that point and ignored the fact that you you stood up for the safety of the man.
But
So this should be, again, it should be, that you were stepping in and doing the right thing, and instead it was turned around and the person, had injuries, etc. Did the person who had injuries and eventually took your place as well, did they turn against you at the same time Morgan did, would you say?
that would be John Erlandson. I don't know, as far as he.
So he never came up to you and said thank you, or said, I wish I listened to you, or anything like that?
Oh, no, I talked to him, and he said that, sorry, he really needed this job. So it goes back to the Nazis, and I hate to bring it up, but you'll see that the Brotherhood of Death and a lot of these organizations are tied to the Nazis.
So what you're kind of hinting at here is an old boys network, isn't that right?
Oh yeah, very very much so.
And so they're used to operating like this, and you definitely sound like a person who kept stepping out of line in ways that they would view it. They would view that you step out of line, you don't go along and get along, and you also make problems because you see
I do the right thing.
are not done right. Correct?
Yeah, I try to do the right thing.
Sure. And that's, there are movies about people like you.
Yeah.
So just for my audience, getting that much information is very good. Now, there are issues to do with the classification of the Coast Guard that happened since 2003, correct?
Well, Homeland Security was already created in 2002, and that's when Tom Ridge was the secretary. He's the first secretary of Homeland Security, and he was also the governor of Pennsylvania. You can see where these people came from and why we're having problems in Pennsylvania.
Right. Okay, so wait 1 second. So now there's a situation that really 9/11 happened in 2001, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. It was since 9/11 that the idea for DHS, Department of Homeland Security, my understanding, was brought forward as a way, an umbrella organization under which all these different, fiefdoms, if you will.
Well, what
CIA, DIA, all these people, that there was a failure. So this was supposed a failure of communication between the different agencies, and therefore they were, Arabs with box cutters supposedly were able to take down our airplanes. That's a lie. Now, everyone knows that, okay? That's not what happened. And I actually have whistleblowers on this story and have talked about this, in the past and investigated it. So according to my whistleblowers, okay, actually 9/11 was orchestrated by the Bush family and other...
On behalf of the European Union.
Yes, and that actually, funny enough, our whistleblower was in an American military organization in Britain that was hands-on with flying fake airplanes into the buildings. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a whistleblower on that level, and that was his job. So obviously, and I don't know that has ever come out in any hearings or anything, by the way. And the organization in England that was fully engaged in this, but that's a whole nother subject. I don't want to really go there. I just wanted to set the scene a little bit. So bottom line, since 2003...
Well, no, let me just interrupt real quick. Is what happened with Homeland Security and so much stuff is that the Transportation Safety Administration was evolved into the Transportation Security Administration, and it kept the TSA name and the TSA logo or acronym and became about security.
And was it under the DHS?
Yes.
And is it still under the DHS?
I believe so.
Okay. So, but there's also this issue, okay, that you and I kind of went back and forth on a lot in our contacts, which was that the Coast Guard, actually, if you look it up, I sent you a copy of what I found on Google. It actually says that it's a civilian organization until such time as we are in a war basically by not just Congress, but by the president, because everything seems to go under the president as commander in chief, that their classification then changes and they are moved under the Navy as a military organization during war. Isn't that correct?
But that isn't how it was perceived in 2003. It was seen that it was a full-fledged standalone branch of military.
Okay.
In Homeland Security. and that
Yeah, right. As the
no,
only military organization
yeah,
under Homeland Security. But
no,
regardless, it had a classification from their point of view at that time as a military organization, contrary to what it started out as, if I understand it correctly, a civilian organization primarily, correct?
and they are trained on the UCMJ in case they are under Title 10 executive orders moved into a branch of military
Okay.
as a person or a group or the entire command.
Okay. So now we flash forward to now. And this is what is most important, at least as far as I can tell. I'm not a lawyer, but from everything I've read and everything you told me, it appears that we are in a time of war. Because when, and this goes back to two, 2020, the stolen election, when Biden supposedly was sworn in, even though he was actually dead, in fact, executed, which few people will say, but Juan O'Savin has said. And Juan O'Savin is a very well-known broadcaster who speaks for the MAGA group and Trump, for what's worth. Okay, so the classification of Coast Guard is under wartime at this time, right now, and under Trump. Now, recently, Trump
But
went into LA.
let me interject real quick
Okay.
because it's not supposed to be a branch of military because that's why we have it. It deals with civilians. Cuban refugees, they're civilian. You use a civilian agency, not a branch of military,
But
to
that's
deal.
neither here nor there if their classification during wartime is as going under the Navy and being military classified.
You don't turn. It's like turning the FBI into a branch of military.
Okay, we may not
You
agree
don't
with
do
it.
that in
Yeah,
times of war.
maybe not logically, but these people do what they want to do rather than
That's
what's
true.
actually supposed to be accurate according to rules and regulations, etc. They just
Yes.
brush those aside, especially when we're in a war. So what I understand is that Trump, he reassumed after Biden was sworn in, and which was fake, but the American people believe that Biden was sworn in. So if you go with that, then what happened in March of that same year, 2021, is he was reinstated by the military. This is what Juan O'Savin has said, because I pay very close attention back those years to him and everything he said. And he said that, and also by the law of war manual that we haven't talked about, which does pertain to all of this. So the thing is that
Well, you see what?
at that point, wait 1 second, let me just finish the
Sure.
story here, because Trump was sworn in as commander in chief in March, I think it's March 11th to be specific, by the military, who knew that Biden was incapacitated, etc., and he was sworn in again as commander in chief. So from that point on, he had the codes. He was in Mar-a-Lago operating what's called COG, I forget.
Continuity of government.
Yeah, continuity government had been set up at Mar-a-Lago in reality.
Yeah.
And I know this from several whistleblowers, by the way. And so at that point, because this even goes back, this is 2021 we're talking about.
Well, wait. You see how Trump has changed the Department of Defense back into the Department of War, which is used to be
Yes.
called before the end of World War II, 1947.
Right. And he's
It
been
was
making changes steadily, like Space Force and various things, in whenever he's been in office. Okay, he's been doing those things. He's now doing them again. Like I was about to say before we went down this road, is that most recently he put troops, National Guard troops, that he brought under a classification to go into the streets of Los Angeles and make peace or control the peace. And he also was charged by our courts, I guess a California court or a federal court, I'm not sure which, that was illegal, that what he did, but he did it anyway. He did put those people, they were literally on the streets of Los Angeles. I don't even know if they're gone yet. So the
Right.
point being is that as commander in chief, he does have the right, as far as he's concerned, to do that. Now, the courts objected, but his lawyers are appealing that objection, right? That said he broke the law by doing that. So I'm just trying to give my audience quickly, a spot by spot overview of this whole setting in which your whistleblowing exists. Okay. Now, the bottom line here is that you had an appeal, and it was the Ninth Circuit Court that dealt with
But,
the appeal, correct?
well, if I may interject and say that the Ninth Circuit had Raymond J. Deary fly out from New York to the Ninth Circuit and rule on the case. And he is a FISA court judge who shouldn't have anything to do with the Ninth Circuit. He's a federal district court judge, a lower court than a justice. That's in the Ninth Circuit. And he was in New York. That these guys are breaking jurisdiction all over the place.
Okay.
Like even McKenna and Brzezinski. McKenna was up in San Francisco, flew down to San Diego to hear my case. So he's coming down from San Francisco to San Diego, totally different jurisdictions. A federal judge couldn't do that, but an administrative law judge can. And then they had Deary, who was he was appointed as a special master on the Trump's presidential records case. And he was a FISA court judge. He flew out from New York to the Ninth Circuit in San Francisco and ruled on my case. And he had Nguyen.
Okay. And that's not illegal?
No, it's so illegal.
It is, you're saying it is
Yes.
illegal. So
he
now
said,
wait one second.
wait, no, wait. He said in the proceedings that I'm here today because there was a shortage of admiralty justices in San Francisco on the bench. How can that be? How can it be? It was. I think he had to give some kind of a excuse,
Right.
for why he was there.
Okay. And as justices or judges, they must know the law, right? So they knew that they had to cover for themselves. So that was a covered job, right?
Yeah.
So that his ass was covered if he should get raked over the coals or even noticed that he did something illegal. But why that judge? Was he known to be pathetic to the needs of the Coast Guard or any particular part of the Coast Guard?
Well, he's beholden to the crown.
Oh, so behind a lot of this is also the admiralty laws, right? So a lot of this goes back to Britain because they are the holders, and all the lawyers technically work for the crown, right?
Well, the Bar Association,
right.
supposedly is the what is it? Something aristocratic registration or registry or whatever.
But it's under the ruling or the charge of England. I mean, it is a part of the admiralty law issues. Okay, so if we take these situations in which you kind of became a pawn that got shifted around and then targeted because you didn't go along and play along.
No, the issue is the Licensed Personnel Board, which was a program or means of replacing the shipping commissioner. The shipping commissioner was enacted in 1872. The shipping commissioner is an Article 3 judge that is tied to a local federal district court. So he's not like Brzezinski in New York, who flies out to L.A., Long Beach. They're actually tied to the port in the federal district court that is ruling on any issues. And the difference
But
between.
didn't you say that the licensing board was dissolved in the 90s, 91?
Yeah, but that's how it's happened little bit over time to where now they're being run by military policemen.
Okay.
That's what Brzezinski.
You said it was dissolved or something, and then you're saying it then went under the purview of military police. What's their designation? Because that's kind of general, military police.
Well, the ALJs, administrative law judges, the Senate had hearings on the title of the hearing officer, and they decided to change them to administrative law judges under the recommendation of a ALJ from the banking industry.
What does the banking industry got to do with
Admiralty or general maritime law? It's about money. It's Lloyd's of London.
And what year did that happen? Do you know?
Oh, I'd have to.
Generally speaking, maybe.
See, well, about the 1980s. That was one thing that happened in the I'm trying to get when Reagan came in, Ronald Reagan, he shut down the I think it was the shipping commissioners. What happened was the since the inception, the Coast Guard was created in 1915. 2 years after the famous, everybody knows what happened in 1913, is the Federal Reserve Act. There is no, it didn't happen by happenstance. It happened intentionally because who was the president at the time? Woodrow Wilson. He was an Anglophile, which means that he loved everything about the British Crown.
Okay. So, but I don't want to get too caught up in all of those designations. What I wanted to really do is lodge this in today, because in today, whether you like it or not, we are in a state of war. Now, I know that we have been under martial law, for example. You can look that up on the internet and see that we have been actually under martial law.
My first website was martiallaw911.com.
Okay.
That was in
we
2000.
In martial law even when 9/11 happened.
Yeah,
my understanding.
Yeah.
Because that gives the reason governments have kept us in that state is it gives them certain powers when that's happening, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
But it's not officially a state of war, correct? Martial law is martial law, but the state of war, the declaration of war, or the presidential and Congress declaring war is another matter. Yes?
We don't declare war anymore because, and now that a lot of this is changing because Article 1, which is Congress, used to have the Department of the Army underneath it. That means when they met, they would deliberate and convene and, enact legislation to declare war. We haven't declared war since World War II.
Okay, not after 9/11?
What?
Declared war.
No.
Okay, so now because I'm bringing in, okay.
But an Article 2 Go ahead and I'll get
Okay,
back to
well,
you.
yeah, you can make your point in a minute. Okay, just let me get this thing out here where I can explain where I'm coming from so the audience, because they might wonder where I'm going with my questions.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to get to is the state of war that the MAGA Trump administration considers that we're under, that happened actually when we were invaded by the CCP, Venezuela, Canada, the UK, MI6 and MI5, and other countries, including Italy, that stole the 2020 election. That's what we're in the throes of that point of view that is held by Trump and Space Force and all of the military under him as commander in chief, who he currently is, and MAGA, okay, of which I am a member. And so when we look at that situation that we're in right now, and Juan says it all the time. If you don't listen to 107, you won't have heard it. But he says we're in a state of war. And
I
so,
I dropped a 2-page pleading to Matt Getz. You remember Matt Getz?
yes, of course.
That was a couple of years ago, and I said in there that we are at a state of war.
Okay. So you understand this. So now this pertains to your case or cases going back even in all those years, because we are currently in a state of war and Coast Guard is part of the Navy, consequently a military organization, regardless of what it might have been in the past, got changed to and back and forth and so on, right?
Right. Well, that's what happened in World War II. The Coast Guard was outside of the Navy, and it got brought into the Navy, made part of the
Apparently
Navy,
in Vietnam as well.
and kicked out. Well, that's the Department of Transportation started in 1965 because of the Coast Guard. It was put into the Department of Transportation, where it was recently in 2003 taken out of the Department of Transportation and moved into the Department of Homeland Security, and then started to declare that it was a branch of military. The Coast Guard Commandant, Admiral Allen, is married to Pamela Hess III. She is a German royal. He is a German royal.
Oh God. These are people current? This man in current position or in the past?
Well, that Admiral Allen has associated himself with NASA.
Since when?
That's the last thing I tracked on him. That was, I think he's been doing that for the last 8 years or so, or
Okay,
10
that
years.
is really fascinating in light of what I know about NASA. Okay, so because NASA is run by the dark.
Carrie,
Yes.
what we're doing right now,
Yes.
pooling our resources and knowledge and everything,
Right.
is what makes us better than the royals, or nobility or aristocracy in Europe. But that they have used the Federal Administrative Procedure Act, which is the administrative state that Amy Coney Barrett was questioned by Kamala Harris in her confirmation hearings, and she was asked about, are you in support of the administrative state, more or less? She said yes.
Okay,
Amy
you're
Coney
making
Barrett.
the point that the administrative state is this federal system run by somehow with links to the British. Is that what
Yes.
you're trying to say?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, going back to the European Union, to the crown, and the royals in all the countries over there.
Yes.
Okay, so, but back to this, when Trump walked in front of the Queen, he was clearly making a statement as everyone has said, and you know about that, I assume, where the United States was no longer going to be under the British Crown. Okay, you're aware of that?
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're in the situation, though, in light of where you are now, and this is something that I don't know that we really talked about offline, but you can, come to whatever conclusion you want. But if someone was to look at your case and know that you were a whistleblower and you were mistreated back in those days, is there any recourse that you actually really have at this point?
I'd say no, unless Trump does something to reinstate the shipping commissioners to the local federal district court. They are under administrative law. There is no end. They can charge you 10 years after the fact for something that wasn't a violation of a law, rule, or regulation at the time.
Right. Okay. Now, again, bringing you up to this time, you seem to have, in other words, if you wanted somebody to do something for you, do you want your license back even at this point? Because that was a point of contention. You didn't get thrown in jail for what you did when you lost your case, the appeal. What happened to you? You lost your license. Isn't that correct?
You won't believe if you took the time to read. McKenna put out a 50-page report trashing me. Brodzinski put out a 50-page report trashing me. The National Transportation Safety Board put out a 50-page report trashing me. The administrative state is there to hold off any and all lawsuits. The victims of 9/11 not one of those persons made it into a federal district court. Not one. Not one.
Right. And it's very, very good for you to highlight that. So at this point, just in terms of your status, number one, you're a whistleblower. So you're like really the quintessential whistleblower that goes way back, even before the whistleblowers that I have been involved in interviewing and bringing forward, which, in other words, you were involved in actual profession in which you noticed things not running the way they should. You called them out, made issues of them, and
I even put in the letter 46 USC 2114, which is the whistleblower protection to merchant marine.
Is that, what do you
No.
mean, you put in a letter, or does that exist? That
I invoked it.
Oh, okay. So it's a ruling or a statute or whatever you call it, right?
What they do as far as legislation, when they enact something like the Whistleblower Protection Act, they take it, break it down, and take it into the individual agencies, like in shipping.
Okay.
That would be 46, which is, entitled shipping. 46 USC, United States Code 2114.
Okay, but
They ignored it.
apparently.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and this actually does relate to a lot of whistleblowers that have come forward under supposedly this protection that's not really protecting them. And I sent you the Borland interviews to show you
Yeah, I watched them.
the military is able to do when they completely ignore the rights of a whistleblower.
But that goes to the whole thing with the 5 eyes, which is now the nine eyes, which became the 14 eyes, which became the 19 eyes. It was British Aerospace Engineering, I think, BAE, that was involved in Borland's case. It was a British Aerospace.
Well, that's where they sent him. After all he did was see a UFO on a base, fly over the base,
and
where
report
he
it.
lived.
Yeah. and report it.
That was his big mistake. Well, he didn't report it right away. He just talked among colleagues on the base. And then I guess the higher ups got wind of it, brought him in and basically fired him and did all these crazy things, which I do highly recommend those. There's actually now 3 videos. There's 2 interviewed directly with him, and then there's a third where they review what's happened since then, which is also very interesting. But these are Jeremy Corbell and the well-known reporter, I think is his name, but anyway, George Knapp. And so they basically go step by step with Borland through his case and what happened to him since then, which is, it's really horrendous sounding. So, and we know that Rush, for example, who brought forward a bunch of witnesses to the UAP hearings, even behind the scenes, and testified himself, has also been threatened and some of his whistleblowers have also been threatened and various things.
I lost both my homes. I hit and killed a guy on PCH that was a drunk. He was smoking marijuana at the time. He was looking in the opposite direction and just walking out across the street. And I thought of Popular Mechanics or one of those magazines. It had on the cover of the a cockroach with a computer chip glued to its back that they could actually steer this cockroach. And this was in 40 years ago. That they could steer this cockroach and get him to go left or right. It was my impression that the guy, because he was on the phone, that somehow the phone was controlling him.
Okay, so he walked out in front of your car. Is that what you're saying?
Yep. And okay. I didn't even see him. He stepped between 2 cars just as I was coming up, and I hit and I pulled him out of his shoes and broke his neck.
Your car did?
Yep.
Okay. But the thing is, what year was that?
That was a while ago. That was 2006, before the Coast Guard brought me into the military tribunal.
Okay, that's interesting. All right. So again, we can't go on all day, and I think we've gone on a while, but I do want to bring it back to where your case fits in. First of all, your case is, it's almost like Serpico, the famous movie Serpico.
He left the country.
Right. So you became a whistleblower in the course of your career within the Coast Guard.
No, I'm not
in part because
I'm not in the Coast Guard. I'm not in the Coast Guard.
Well, but then you were, right?
No, I've never been in the Coast Guard.
Okay,
I've always been
in
Navy.
Okay, so you were a military officer nonetheless, yes?
That's the only way I've been able to survive.
Okay. Was that the lieutenant designation? Was that your rank?
I was up for promotion to lieutenant commander in the 2004. I forgot what they call them, the promotion board or whatever.
Okay.
And I would have been promoted. I had been keeping all my stuff current, but the Coast Guard said that I was passed up for promotion, and I wasn't.
Okay. So again, bringing you forward to today, the bottom line is that the Coast Guard currently is under wartime status as far as Trump is concerned. Now, whether the courts agree with him, because the courts are highly infiltrated and taken over.
Yeah.
And so there's likely to try to go against him whenever they get the chance. Although sometimes lately, he's gotten all his cases reversed because they were lying back in the day anyway. But for all intents and purposes, what I'm trying to do is establish that we are in a state of war, that as far as Trump is concerned, we're in a state of war. Congress has not declared a state of war, but actually most of Congress, according to the White Hats, the White Hat military, Trump, and all the indictments that even secretly have been taken up, a lot of Congress are actually going to be up on charges for treason due to the way they behaved during the 2020 investigation into the election fraud.
I could give you a bunch of names. Brzezinski or
Give me
McKenna or,
Sorry?
Mitch McConnell.
Right.
He's married to Elaine Chao. And in my own case, I was in San Diego. The union attorney had filed a 42 USC 1983, which is called a Bivens action. It was a Supreme Court case that was 6 unknown DEA agents had violated this guy's constitutional rights, and they had filed it and then let it go. Even on they took me up to a certain point and then dropped me. The union. They're supposed to provide their legal counsel, and they dropped me because we had people in the union or the MEBA plans that are named Axelrod. And David Axelrod is a political advisor to Clinton.
Okay, but when did they drop you, and what does that have to do with the political advisor to Clinton?
After they filed charges against me in 2003, shortly into 2004 or at the end of 2003, they dropped me, and I represented myself in 2008, which is a continuation of the case. McKenna was in 2003. Brzezinski came in 2008. And I represented myself against a branch of military in civilian clothes. And they're in military JAG uniforms.
Okay, fair enough. I think that we've drawn quite a picture here as far as I'm concerned. I think that especially military people will relate to this story and can fill in the blanks, of where we haven't gone, because there's a lot of different sort of connections here. But as far as bringing you forward to today, from the Trump administration's point of view, the Coast Guard is now part of the Navy because we're in a state of war, and they will give them orders on that basis, won't they?
I don't know what do you mean?
Well, like the Coast Guard, not like the National Guard that Trump recently put in place in Los Angeles. He gave them an order as the commander in chief during wartime to go into LA to protect the civilians. That was his commander in chief right.
Right.
So if he wanted to do that with the Coast Guard in some other capacity that we don't know, because we're also getting into this whole tariff thing with all the countries. And so all of this involves trade. It involves the coastlines, right? The fact that Long Beach, for example, was owned by the Chinese until recently. I believe they took it out of Chinese hands. That's my understanding. So there's lots of...
But it's owned by the Mediterranean Shipping Company that is Swiss owned. Well, not Swiss owned. It's Swiss flagged, but Italian owned.
Okay, some more mixtures of this.
That's APL.
It's extraordinary, but I think that even so, I'm sure that as commander-in-chief, Trump is able to take the Coast Guard and tell them what to do if he should so desire, from his point of view, right?
Yeah.
You have to agree with that. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that we're going to just leave this here. And I want to thank you, Eric, for being so direct and very clear in answers to my questions. I think that people are going to understand, you know, even though you have a long case that went on for years, how you have gotten wrapped into the system as a whistleblower, and also your rights being violated time and time again, even through the court system, apparently, and through the military. So if you want to, let's, I talked about people that I could bring your case to. If I was to send this video to certain people, what is it you're asking for? Are you asking for money? Are you asking for a reasoning statement of your license? Are you asking for a job?
Back pay and everything else.
Oh, okay. So out of
Because
your own mouth,
like
can
on
you
the
say,
comment, I should be paid until they decide to pay me off. I am from the date that I was discharged or whatever on. I never got any discharge papers. I never got anything from the. There was no ship captain that was called out from master mates and pilots or whatever to be in charge of the ship. The chief engineer was in charge of the ship.
okay, but they were not able to give you discharge papers, correct?
He didn't. And that was an order from Archie Morgan, the fourth.
Okay, but again, that's a violation of your rights, correct?
Right.
Okay.
They're supposed to pay until I actually get my discharge and the pay and everything. They're supposed to pay from the date that I was separated in October of 2000 until today, if they paid me today.
Interesting. Okay.
The same with the Matson is the Matson ship, the Maui. It was called as a 90-day job. I only got 30 out of it because they fired me.
Okay.
Because
So
there is
now, have you written a book? You sort of said you did, but it's not published or something.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Okay, because that would be valuable to people that want to help you in this regard. Correct?
Yeah, big time.
Okay. All right. Now we have an audience, but I don't know if they've actually wanted to ask you any questions. So I'm just going to look really quickly in case there was a question. And it doesn't look like,
I know we've kind of been all over the map, but it's hard to fill in all the holes in 25 years of dealing with this when it involves the country as a whole. Because now, let me get this out: is instead of handling grievances on the ship when they happen right then and there, that a shipping commissioner, as enacted, was he carried on his duties on the ship. He came out, pay off, sign on. He oversaw the captain of the vessel. He was he was a federal not a federal administrative law judge. He was a Article 3 judge ruling in admiralty. We don't have those anymore. That's what Deary said. That's why he flew out to California.
okay. Well, regardless, I think we need to kind of wrap this up here. And if you have, and by the way, I can see that the video is lagging considerably behind us. So it looks kind of like we're speaking and nothing is coming out, but we're talking in audio. So the recording will be caught up once I get this wrapped up. So just wanted to say, thank you very much. Obviously, you've made yourself extremely knowledgeable, even though you're not a lawyer, right?
Right.
Okay. And I do know.
I couldn't I couldn't do anything about going back to the law school or anything else because the Coast Guard had kept me in these proceedings for 14 years.
Okay. So, is there an email address where somebody could reach you?
Upload in the zone at gmail.com. UPLOADINTHEZONE at gmail.com. Upload in the zone at gmail.com. And you
Okay,
got to
I'll
be,
put that under the video, and you can also type it out for me on a message so that I make sure I don't misspell anything.
yeah, it has a tendency to put ing after uploading, and it shouldn't be, it says
Okay,
upload
yes.
in the zone.
Okay, no problem. Well, I think it's fascinating, and I think all the areas that it touches on, showing sort of across the board bad treatment of whistleblowers. And I think that obviously you're not the only one. Borland and others, Grush, in the more recent past here. And I think that if one issue comes forward in all of this, we need better treatment and protections for whistleblowers right out.
Well, everybody in the Merchant Marine doesn't have a system of due process. To get a grievance heard in the Merchant Marine, you have to sue. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. The shipping commissioner came out to the ship and heard any and all grievances, and that was it. And, anything else that you did, yeah.
I mean, in the past, yes,
Yeah.
I understand.
And the Coast Guard replaced them all.
Okay.
That happened in World War I and World War II.
Okay. So again, I'm going to let you go. We're going to wrap this up. Do you have any parting words?
Thank you for having me on. I would ask that people, do something about it because your country is being taken from you by every stretch of the imagination with AI and robotics and so much more coming out. It will not be your country anymore. These are the last few years that you have anything to do about it or say about it, because after that, it's all over. We didn't have my entire career as a Merchant Marine since getting out of the academy in 1991. There has not been, and you pay for this, that money goes towards shipping, that's what Congress and the Senate all are supposed to do, and they haven't done anything. They have turned our shipping and everything else about our country over to the Swiss Union and the European Union. Not Trump. I'm saying that a lot of people that came before him, they are evil. I don't know how else to say it. I would say that they are evil.
Okay, I do think that Trump and the White Hats are probably more than aware of that. And at this point, they're probably slowly trying to roll that thing back on itself and arrest the appropriate parties. The appropriate parties are under indictment and so on and so forth. But this is a slow,
There's a lot more to do.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. Okay. Well, Eric, thank you very much for being on my show. Thank you for, again, you're very clear when you were answering me, and you really kept it succinct so people could grasp it, because we only have, an hour or two, probably 2 hours at this point. So thanks again, and take care. And if we have further developments, I'll have you back on the show, and then we'll update people. Okay?
Okay.
And I will also send this video to certain parties that I hope can help you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks everyone for watching. Take care. And And I have to run the credits, so you can go ahead and shut your side of this talk here down, and I'll just run the credits and take us off the screen.
Thanks.